Today on Monson Made This, I am bringing it back to basics. As I sort of teased or previewed in my What's Coming Up in 2019 video, I mentioned that I was going to be making recipes, at least for this first month, using things that I have included on that pantry staple list. So today is just kind of the beginning of that. It's my first video for Veganuary, and I just wanted to make a really simple recipe that's kind of just like a base that then you could add a bunch of stuff to, and even take those techniques that I show you and use them in other recipes. So today I'm going to be making just a very simple breakfast burrito that contains a tofu scramble and some roasted potatoes. And I'm gonna show you how exactly I like to make my tofu scramble, how I kind of basic season it, and you could add whatever you want to that. And then I'll show you how to roast these potatoes, which is really simple. Just kind of toss them with some seasonings, throw them in the oven, and you can do that with a bunch of other root vegetables as well. So it's just kind of a simple technique for roasting things. So stick around and I will show you how I make all of this, and we'll have delicious breakfast burritos in the end. I have here a couple Yukon Gold potatoes. I'll probably end up using about 4 of them this size. And normally with Yukon Gold, I wouldn't be peeling them, but because these are showing their age a little bit, I just want to clean them up by peeling them. You could also use russet potatoes, Idaho potatoes. In the end, you want probably about 4 cups worth of cubed potatoes. So I'm just going to be peeling these into my little compost bin here. I've been composting since I did the plastic-free July challenge. There's videos on my channel if you want to learn about that, but composting has really stuck with me for that, and I find it's just a really great way to reuse my vegetable scraps, and I find that I just throw away less garbage in the end, and stuff doesn't stink as bad because I'm putting the vegetable and fruit peelings or scraps into something that doesn't, that's going to compost and kind of break down, and it's not going in the garbage. I think that makes sense. So I'm just going to finish peeling these here. The technique that I'm going to show you here for baking, my oven is already preheated to 425. So you want to cook these anywhere between 400 and 450. It just kind of depends on how comfortable you are in the kitchen. Go a little bit higher if you're more comfortable, if you can just kind of keep an eye on it. If you're kind of new in the kitchen, maybe a little bit skittish, I would go down to 400. So 425 is just kind of a nice medium there. And these are going to roast for probably about 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to flip them or toss them halfway through. And this technique is something you can do with pretty much any type of root vegetables or winter squash. Just cube them up, toss them with a little bit of oil and seasoning, throw them on a baking dish, put them in the oven, kind of toss them halfway through, test them to see if they're done, if they taste good, and then just go about your day. So, all right, well, I'm done peeling these couple of potatoes. I have a few more to do, and then I will meet you back at my island, and we'll chop them up and season them. I want to cut these potatoes up into about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch little cubes, and trying my best to keep them as uniform as possible. They will just cook more evenly if they're all about the same size. Now, this recipe is something that I kind of have been making or eating since I was a kid. It's just kind of spawned off this kind of potato and egg dish my mom used to make, and then we started to put it in tortillas. So as I've evolved and changed, or depending on what I have in my kitchen, the recipe kind of changes. And so when I went vegan, I decided, hey, I want that same dish. I like the potato and egg combo, and I like to throw in a tortilla, making it easier to eat. So this version here is just kind of an evolution of that dish that I used to have as a kid. And recently this kind of came about, and the reason I wanted to do this video is because I was over at some family's house for Christmas, and there was a brunch, and there were a lot of people coming over, and I was told that there weren't going to be really any vegan options, so I needed to make something that was going to be kind of quick and easy, that would be able to be cooked in the kitchen alongside other omnivorous dishes without really getting in the way in someone else's kitchen. So I decided to make these breakfast burritos, and ended up being just a really easy, delicious thing for me to make. I didn't really take up too much space in the kitchen. I wasn't in anybody's way. And yeah, I was able to eat alongside other people at the brunch and felt just like one of the normal people, in air quotes, just enjoying my breakfast like everyone else, even though mine was completely vegan. Now with this, I'm probably going to fill most of this tray up. If you notice that your potatoes, if you have too many potatoes for your tray, which by the way, I have it lined with Silpat here. If you find you have too many potatoes, they're not able to have some space on all sides, then you definitely want to add another tray. If they are too close together or if there's not enough space around the potatoes, they're gonna just steam and get mushy instead of get crispy. So just make sure you give them enough space around all sides. All right, these are all chopped up. Now it's time to season them. All right, the potatoes are all chopped up and I want to liberally season them. I'm going to be using garlic powder. And you know, you want to sort of err on the side of too seasoned. I mean, obviously be careful with the salt a little bit, but you definitely want these to be really flavorful, really seasoned. So, you know, maybe go a little bit more than you would normally. So that's garlic powder. Here is onion powder. I'm going to add some smoked paprika. Some red pepper flake for spice. I have a Trader Joe's 21 seasoning salute, I think it's called. Yep, blend. Lots of black pepper. And you can use whatever kind of salt that you like. I'm actually going to be using a Lowry seasoning salt. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just drizzle a little bit of olive oil over the top and then toss with my hands. The last thing I want to do before I stick these into the oven is actually give one of these potatoes a taste. And the reason I want to do that is to make sure that they're seasoned well. The only way to really know how your food is going to taste is if you taste it. So for me, I think this is the perfect level of salt. Like I said, excuse me, you want it to be a little bit more seasoned than you think because the flavors are going to kind of mute slightly when they cook. But you want this to just be full of flavor when it goes in the oven, and that way you know that it's full of flavor when it comes out. So just give it a taste. Raw potato is not going to hurt you. So let's put this in the oven. Again, I have it set for 425 Fahrenheit, and I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes and just kind of keep an eye on them. When it looks like they're starting to get brown and crispy, I'm going to flip them over and then give them a taste again, see if they're delicious and if I want to eat more. If they seem like they're perfectly cooked, then I'll take them out. So let's throw them in the oven. Here I have a package of firm tofu, and I think firm tofu is the perfect texture for this particular scramble. I've made something similar to this in my breakfast crunch wrap video, as well as my garlic noodles. I do a similar treatment of the tofu, but basically just want to cut open the package, drain the water out, give it just a slight squeeze to remove any like serious excess water. And then we're just gonna take this directly over to the pan and crumble it in there. I am not a fan of tofu scramble that is kind of pureed, so I like to keep them in fairly large chunks. They can always be broken down a little bit more, but I like to keep them in fairly decent sized pieces. So I have a pan here on medium-high heat, a little bit of olive oil in the pan, and I'm just gonna break this tofu up directly in here. Like I said, if the pieces seem a little bit big, I can always break them up later, but I just really hate when the tofu scramble is just kind of like, I don't know, like it's a puree, like it's just kind of a runny mess. So I like to keep them in chunks, sort of like little nuggets. I mean, I think scrambled eggs is sort of a personal choice for people. People like them differently. Some people like them a little bit more runny. Some people like them a little bit more nuggety. I'm on the nugget side, so that's how I'm going to be making these today. And this is probably about a 10-inch skillet. You, just like the potatoes, you sort of want these to have their space to move and to brown. So make sure to give them enough space. It's also helpful to use a non-stick skillet. because it does have a tendency to stick even with a little bit of oil. So make sure you have a good solid nonstick skillet for this. Now before I flip it or move it or anything, I want to season it. And it may seem a little bit weird, but I'm gonna start out by juicing about a half of a lemon over the top. And actually I think I'm gonna use almost most of the juice from the other half as well. Now, this dish isn't gonna taste exactly like scrambled eggs. It's just kind of a delicious dish on its own that kind of reminisces on scrambled eggs, but you're not gonna eat this and think, oh my God, this tastes exactly like scrambled eggs. It's just a really delicious tofu scramble. So I have the lemon juice in there, and I'm just gonna sprinkle pretty generously some nutritional yeast over the top. I'll have the full recipe in the description below for all the measurements. Going to put a lot of black pepper. A little bit of salt. I have this hot serrano salt that Vegan Yak Attack actually made for me. Salt that. And then I'm also going to add just a little bit of garlic powder and onion powder. Not too much. So our goal here is to just kind of get rid of this liquid, let it simmer out, and then next we're going to just concentrate on getting it kind of browned up on all sides. Gonna leave it at about medium-high heat, and just kind of let it simmer for a little bit, let it sizzle, and stir it maybe every minute or two, and just being cautious not to break up any of the pieces too much. It's been about 5 minutes. If you can see here, most of the liquid is evaporated from the pan, and the tofu is starting to get a little bit brown. Stirring them gently is to not break things up too much, even though I have gone in and kind of split up a couple of them that I felt were a little bit too big. Now, if you look, or I mean I can tell here, the pieces seem still a little bit like jiggly. And that's what we're trying to get rid of. So we want to cook these down quite a bit more until that jiggle kind of removes and they just become a little bit firmer. And then we'll taste them and see if they're seasoned properly, because we want to make sure that these are full of flavor as well as the potatoes, so that when they go into the burrito together, everything tastes delicious. The potatoes have been in the oven for about 15 minutes now. So I just want to take them out and give them a little bit of a toss and just kind of check in on them. They're not too browned. I can feel already just by stirring them around that they're still a little bit firm. So I think they're gonna have to go in at least another 10, maybe even up to 15 minutes. So just toss these around a little bit. If you were doing this directly onto the baking dish, or you were using parchment paper, the bottoms are gonna brown up a little bit more just from their contact with the baking sheet, but since I'm using Silpat, we're not really gonna get that. As well, if you're using convection, it's gonna brown up a little bit more on the surface. So those are tossed around a little bit, throw them back in the oven, check them again in another 10 minutes. So this has been going for probably about close to 10 minutes now, and you can see that there's some browning occurring here. It's still a little bit softer than I'd like it to be, so I'm going to turn down the heat to medium. And at this point, I am going to give one of the pieces a taste just to see how the seasoning level is. I think I'm going to add a bit more nutritional yeast and maybe a slight bit of salt. And I definitely know these need to just cook down a little bit more. So I can tell just by the way that they're just a little bit more spongy and by the brownness, and I've also tasted them, that these are pretty much done. And I'm going to add, I just had some red bell pepper, some onion, and some jalapeno in my fridge, so that's what I'm adding here. And I'm just doing this like the last minute or so, just so they can lightly kind of soften a bit, but that they still hold their integrity. If you had some like vegan sausage or some vegan breakfast meat that you wanted to use, I would suggest cooking that ahead of time and then kind of crumbling it or adding it at this point here. So I'm just going to turn off the heat right now, kind of let this hang out on the stove until my potatoes are done, and then we can assemble. Potatoes have been in here for 10 more minutes, so they've been in there a total of 25 minutes at this point. So I just wanted to toss them around again, just kind of check in with them, see how they're doing, give them a taste and see how the texture is, if they're done, if they maybe need a little bit more salt. So I'm just gonna use my fingers, pardon me, grabbing one of the larger ones. They're not done. Only need a few more minutes, so, but I do taste that they can use a bit of salt. Pardon me, Tuff. So I'm just gonna add a bit more salt here. Toss them around again and then return them to the oven. I think probably about 5 to 10 more minutes will be good. All right, so my potatoes in the oven, I'm just about to take those out. My tofu scramble is finished. I have sort of my prep station here ready to go. I have my tortilla and some foil. I'll show you why I have that here in just a moment. So, well, let's take the potatoes out and then we'll make sure that those are fully done and then we can make some burritos. You can hear them. They've definitely changed quite a bit since last I saw them. They actually did go in like a full 10 minutes after the last check. And I just want to give them one final taste to make sure that they are in fact done. The trick with potatoes is you know that they're done when you keep wanting to go back for more. So perfectly creamy on the inside, nice skin on the outside. So we're ready to assemble some burritos. To begin, I'm gonna start with just a nice layer of potatoes, probably about 1/4 to a 1/2 cup's worth. I don't want to overcrowd my tortilla. Bit of the tofu scramble on top, about the same amount. And I'm actually going to be adding some cheese to these. This is some American style follow your heart slices. If you want, use whatever your favorite vegan cheese is. Just add a little slice to the top. Now the foil here is just so that I can kind of prep these in advance. These are really great to make as kind of like breakfast meal preps. You can keep them in your fridge. If you want to make a bunch ahead of time, you can keep them in the oven for like a breakfast party or a brunch. And it's just really nice to have these cute little packages of burritos ready to go in the fridge whenever you want one. If you wanted to use parchment instead of foil, that would be easier for you to microwave them. Otherwise, just make a batch, keep them in the oven at about 200 degrees until everyone's ready to eat them, and you have delicious breakfast burritos. Well, I hope you enjoyed this recipe. It's really simple, just basically potatoes and tofu. These ingredients can be found pretty much everywhere. The only thing that might be a little bit difficult to source for some of you is the nutritional yeast, but it's easily available online. And if you have any sort of health food stores or stores that have like a health food section, you should be able to find it in there. So my breakfast burrito is ready to go. I'm ready to dig in. I'm going to try to open it like Chipotle suggests you open their burritos. Okay. Perfect. I also have some Taco Bell sauce here, I think. This is Del Taco. Some taco sauce that I've saved, and I'm just gonna generously apply some of that and give this a taste. It's so good. It's really important that you taste your ingredients along the way and that you make sure that each thing is good on its own. If you have something that's a little bit under-seasoned with something that's perfectly seasoned, the entire dish is gonna be under-seasoned. So make sure you're tasting things along the way so that the final product like this is full of flavor and just as delicious to eat as the individual components. So I'm really happy with these. This recipe probably makes about 5 to 6 of these burritos. Like I said, easy to just keep in your fridge to save, easy to make for a crowd, serve I don't know, 5 or 6 people. And it's just a perfect dish to bring to someone else's house or just to have on hand for your own self. So I'm gonna finish this burrito. I'm done talking. Thank you for watching. Hopefully that you were inspired by this. Roasting potatoes, you can use these in any other application, even just eating. It's hard to keep my hands out of this. Tofu Scramble, again, just a really simple, easy thing. You could just make this for breakfast if you wanted. So enjoy this, try it. If you do, tag me on Instagram at monsonmadethis. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to this channel if you have not yet already. I will be back next week with another recipe video. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I think that's all. All right, have a great week. See you later.